Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for coming on this lovely Saturday to join me with my Profit with Purpose talk. So many of you that do know me know that I love to play games. So I love to start off with an icebreaker. So if you could look around you and see someone hopefully that you don't know and talk about three things. So the first is simply just your name. Second is what you know of impact investing. And third is your spirit animal. Okay? Cool. So I'll give you guys 2 minutes to discuss. I feel like you guys are really into that, so you'll really like the last part of this, which is one by one, you're going to all come up to the front and act out your spirit animal. I'm just kidding. Look at your faces. It was awesome. Everyone's like, oh my God, I want to be an elephant. Okay, so we're going to kick into my talk, which is all about impact investing. I think the best way to do that is to talk about simply what will not be discussed today. So the issue I got when I said I want to host this talk is people were messaging me and being like, oh my God, this is what I wanted. I want to learn how to invest. I want to make a ton of money. And I got really worried because that's not what this talk is about. This talk is not about the best place to put your money, sadly. This talk also is not how to retire early. This talk is not about charities. So a lot of misconception. Hey, how's it going? Anderson, feel free to take a seat. This talk is not about charities. A lot of the big misconception is in order to create an impact, you need to donate your money. We'll get into that. And this talk is not about completing your 2018 tax return. So everyone knows that Tuesday is your deadline. Unfortunately, even though I'm an accountant, I will not be talking about tax returns. And lastly, I will not be selling you anything today at a steep discount. So what will I be talking to you about? I will be talking to you about what is impact investing, different ways to impact investing resources, and you'll also get embarrassing or awkward stories of myself. Cool. So what is my goal today? So my goal is twofold. So simply, what I want is all of us to come out of here, including myself, knowing a tiny bit more about impact investing. And that's what I like to call ourselves, the scholars. Now, there's another portion of us, maybe a little bit smaller, that are going to come out of this thinking, hey, I'm already in this space, or hey, I'm motivated to do more about this space. We call you the entrepreneurs. Now, let's talk about today's generational timeline. People are thinking, okay, why do people want to create an impact? Why do I want to invest my money to be able to get more of a social and environmental impact rather than just a financial return? So I think what we need to do is step back in history, and I think it seems like most of us are millennials, that millennials are the biggest generation that want to create an impact. They really want to see beyond just financial returns. And I think we need to take, hey, feel free to come in. Thanks for coming. We need to take a step back and actually look at the biggest problems that other generations had in the working age. So this is between the ages of 17 and 65 years old. So let's take a quick look at the silent generation. So what did this generation really have to deal with? There was World War I, as we all know, and as soon as they came back from World War I, people had to deal with the highest unemployment rates. So if you compare ourselves to the recession, which was in 2008, unemployment hit almost 9%. Back after World War I, it was 1 in 3 people were unemployed, which is just crazy. You had people literally with resumes hanging off their shirt. Then you had the Spanish flu. So we all have heard of SARS and all these other diseases, but the Spanish flu wiped out 500 million people across the world. And then when you thought it was all over, people were just headed back into World War II. So let's take a look at the baby boomers. So this generation had to really rebuild the economy after World War II. And they were fighting for basic civil rights, and then also had to deal with the Cold War. And when you thought that diseases were over, you had polio, which was a huge epidemic that people were really scared to even have children because they thought that they would end up handicapped. So let's take a quick look at Generation X, which is the activist generation. So taking a look at generation, they fought against conscription, which was being able to be forced to go to war. They also dealt with other basic rights, the start of the same-sex marriage. They also had the fight for women's rights, and you also had the peak of the AIDS epidemic. People were literally scared to hook up. So now you have millennials. So millennials are fortunate. We are the highest educated generation when it comes to all the previous generations. But with that actually comes a lot of cons. We have the most amount of debt when we come out of school. This prevents us from buying things like houses. And a crazier fact is, although we don't have wars, none of us are scared to actually be shipped off and have to fight for our lives, and we're not afraid of flus like the Spanish flu or polio, we have the highest depression and anxiety rates, and we're the least satisfied in our jobs. Forbes did a study where they interviewed all these millennials, and they asked them what they felt that was the biggest worry, and surprisingly, it was FOMO. So millennials thought that they were scared of the fear of missing out. But for those of you who don't know this classic meme, this is from the Fire Festival, where millennials were worried about actually missing out on a large party. What millennials are FOMOing about is causing impact in their jobs. Millennials are most likely to switch their jobs 4 to 6 times before they even reach 30. Back in the baby boomers and silent generation, people were staying in their jobs for 40 years. So imagine graduating, or in their case, not even graduating, and being in the same job till you retire. Like looking at the faces in a room, like it's just shocking. So let's talk about impact investing. So I'm not here to tell you, hey, I can have you create impact. I'm telling you that a way that you can actually create a small bit of impact is just in your regular investments, where typically you're putting that in stocks and bonds or your savings account, but you actually put that behind companies that have themes that you're passionate about. So let's take a look. A lot of the misconception in school is that people say, hey, if I have some sort of impact, if I do something good, I'm getting an alpha, an out return. What I'm showing you here is if we consider social environment to be the norm and that all businesses should do this, what is the devaluation against your peers when you're not having a social environmental impact? So Morgan Stanley did this study where they looked at their clients in these sectors, and you can realize that retail banks takes a 3% hit. But other sectors that are more tied to kind of consumers, that are more discretionary, like consumer goods, biopharmaceuticals, and something as oil and gas, see almost up to 20% of a devaluation when they're not having any social or environmental impact. So has anyone heard here of generation investment management? Any hands? All right then. Has anyone heard of this fellow? Would you like to tell me who this is?
That is Mr. Al Gore.
Yes. So Al Gore is someone, as many of you know, lost the presidential election in 2004. And after that, one of his big policy was about climate change. So he really wanted to emphasize that we need to act and improve our climate. So unfortunately, he lost, so he decided to make an investment firm with a buddy called David Blood, who was actually the former CEO of Goldman Sachs Asset Management. And unlike, a little tidbit, is unlike traditional investment firms where you usually take the names of their individuals as the name of the firm, in this case it would have been Blood and Gore Partners. They decided actually not to do that and chose the name Generational Investment Management. And this firm right now is focused on actually impacting businesses with a portfolio around 30 to 35 companies, but the size is $18.5 billion today. Okay, so let's talk returns. So a lot of you are wondering, okay, this sounds all awesome, like charities raise a lot of money, but I really want to receive my money back. And this is what I'm here to tell you. If you invested $1 in 20 years ago, and you invested in just a traditional company in the US public stock exchange, you would have received $14.46, which is pretty great over 20 years. But if you invested in companies that had some sort of social environmental impact, you would have received $28.36. So it all looks good, and this is a Harvard business study, and Oxford University actually did a similar study in Europe, and it had the same results. But what I'm here to tell you is not that you'll receive more money by investing in impact investing. What I'm trying to say is you have the option of actually either, in this case, achieving higher, but also achieving the same returns. So instead of just putting your money blindly in, say, stocks or mutual funds, you can actually look at companies that have a social impact that we'll go into and get similar returns. Okay, so like I said, I love to play games, and I like to keep things interactive. and you guys can all come act out your spirit animal in the end. But I think we'll take a journey. So I'd like to start off by saying, like, impact investing, there's so many different facets to it. And what I'm trying to show you through these 6 journeys is that you can take it into different routes. But I think we'll probably won't finish all of these, but hopefully you come out of this being like, hey, I want to learn more. So with that, I'll leave it to a group. If you guys want to just pick one, we'll kind of.
Wanderlust.
All right. It's also hashtags for millennials, as you guys know. So, okay. So let's go through the Wanderlust journey. So Wanderlust, basically the synopsis around this is we live in developed nations and we're pretty fortunate, right? Like I mentioned, we don't have the fear of going away for war. We don't have to deal with diseases. But there are other places in the world where they actually still have to worry about this. So we can use our money to help support this. And as a kid, I loved videos. So let's just watch a little video. Fingers crossed.
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race. Everybody line up! Shoulder to shoulder. Take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up. We're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. A $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and look.
Awesome. So I ended it there because it's actually a Geico commercial. But so the understanding here is, like you saw in the video, there's people that, not because they're not working hard, not because they just gave up, but people are just born with disadvantages in terms of just economically and financially. So what microfinance, which is a type of impact investing, is you're trying to bring that bottom line, the individuals are at the back of the line, a little bit forward in life. This isn't about helping the people who are already ahead kind of seek and win that race even faster, but to help society kind of move up a space. So microfinance is basically a type of banking that is presented to people who typically wouldn't receive that banking before, which is lower and poorer families. Credit is a really great way for people to jumpstart their life. You can receive this loan that you can utilize and be able to really step forward and create businesses and receive cash flows going forward. But these poor individuals don't have collateral. So that's what banks are looking for. They want you to kind of put something on risk, whether that's your parents' money or that's your house. These poor individuals literally have nothing. So what microfinance says is, instead of them basically risking something that they don't have, these individuals are actually risking their life. Because without microfinance, their basically life expectancy is going to come down. So the best way to kind of explain this is through an example. And it's through a book I actually read, and someone might know, some of you might know from Muhammad Yunus, which is called The Banker for the Poor. So Muhammad Yunus was a professor, and he was walking in Bangladesh down his village, and he noticed that there was a lady there just working on a stool. But she was quite poor, and she had 3 kids that looked very malnourished. So he asked her for her story. And unfortunately, in Bangladesh, men can actually divorce women by simply saying, I divorce you. And there's no split of proceeds or anything. He takes everything, and she's left to fend with her kids. So it's a flawed system that happens to a lot of women. So when that happens, which is exactly what happened to this lady, she realized that she needed capital. She needed to survive herself and to provide for her kids. Like I said, there's no banks lending to this lady, so she has only 2 options. The first is to beg, and the second is to go to these crazy money lenders, like street sharks, that charge up to 10 to 20% interest a day, which is crazy. So that's what she does. She goes to a money lender, or she begs. In this case, she went to a money lender, and this money lender actually gave her the tools for the stool that she was making right now. So she takes all those materials, accepts a ridiculous interest rate, and utilizes that. So she starts building the stool, which is what Muhammad saw her doing. Then she realizes when she's done the stool that she has to pay back the loan. So the money lender, because he has all the advantage here, charges her the nice stool that he gets back and gives her 5 rupees. So 5 rupees is the equivalent of barely enough food just for her. So keep in mind what she has to do. She also has to feed her 3 children. So what ends up happening is mothers and their families end up actually not eating themselves and go back into this endless loop. And she gets weaker and weaker, and eventually she passes away, and her kids take on that loan. So how do we get this endless loop to stop? And that's where microfinance comes in. So these banks are able to use education, for one reason, are able to really group up all these individual women, and women are seen as the backbone to families in microfinance, which is why microfinance is very centered around providing capital to women, and are able to give her that initial loan that she needed to get the materials herself to build that stool. So when she does the loop, she builds that stool, she's able to give it to market at fair market price, gets a much higher return, and then she's able to build 2 stools, and it comes back, and she's able to build 3 stools and start a business and able to really thrive and send her kids to school. So that's the real impact of microfinance. Now, like I mentioned, a little bit of background on myself is that I was able to actually start my career in impact investing, coincidentally. So I actually didn't know it was impact investing. I basically did coffee. I worked at Tim Hortons when I was a kid, and I was like, oh my God, I need to get a job. And they were sending people out to Nicaragua, and I was like, hey, I'll go. And I went to Nicaragua to learn about something called microfinance and to really pump up my resume. So I started off in Nicaragua, which is beautiful. And Nicaragua, unfortunately, as beautiful as it is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And I got to work for this cooperativa, which is a microfinance institution that grouped up all these women and were able to provide them loans themselves. And that is me and my friend Emma Harris, who actually works at Staples Studio at a coffee plantiva, who was one of our microfinance clients. So let's take a jump start and look at actually individual stories quickly. So here we have Maria. So Maria was one of my first clients. Maria was basically the tortilla maker for her village. So every day, the entire village would line up behind Maria's door and look for tortillas. And without even any education, they knew economies of scale, that it was better for Maria to make the tortillas for the entire village than rather have each one of them make their own tortillas, and they all had their own businesses. The issue with Maria is that she was really not efficient in how she made tortillas. So there was so much demand, but not enough supply. And once we gave her initial loans, the problem didn't get better because the products that she were buying, which were flour and other materials, were actually going bad before she could actually utilize them. So what we decided is, looking at her business, which we actually got to live with her for a week to figure out, is to buy her that beautiful pot in the back. So that pot actually let her basically feed way more people and utilize her materials much quicker. And she was able to feed the entire village by the time we left. Quickly going to another family that we stayed with. This was a local shoe manufacturer. And this business initially started with what the family would do is they would go out and look for blown out tires and make shoes out of them. And once we got there, we knew that wasn't sustainable. You were really dependent on just waiting for those tires to burst on the roads to make those shoes. So we helped diversify their business by introducing cloth. So they were able to make cloth shoes and really stabilize their revenues. And there's a photo I'm going to show, and the backstory about this young gentleman right here, Diego. We promised him, I told him if I was ever going to take this photo of him, that I was going to come back here and show the people in Canada. And although they live in poverty, they're actually quite knowledgeable about all Hollywood celebrities, which is odd. And I told him that I was going to tell the ladies back here that he was the Nicaraguan Brad Pitt. And this was a smile that I got, which is awesome. So one of my favorite clients was Donna Rosa. So as you can tell, this was kind of near the end of my trip because I'm 30 pounds much heavier because of all the empanadas I was eating. But Donna Rosa was basically the chief of her village of the Cooperativa. She helped solve smaller problems and really made sure the 5 women that were in her Cooperativa were able to pay back their loans and really support each other. And it's actually a really cute photo because we lived with her for 2 weeks, but she refused to take any photos with us. And we're like, oh, maybe she doesn't like us, like we're just Westerners. And the last day, she's like, okay, I'll take a photo with you on your last day. And we didn't see her. We're like, oh my God, where is Donna Rosa? And then it turns out she actually went to her local beauty salon in order to make sure that she could look great for all our photos. So it's actually incredible. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit on microfinance. And before we go back to our next impact journey, I know unfortunately some of you have bought coffee, but we will take a small coffee break. And then right here, sorry, I have a slide actually for this. And it will come back in 5 minutes because I know those seats are super uncomfortable. So if you guys want to walk a bit, and then we'll come right back. Go. Perfect. So we talked about developing nations. So that was just, even when it comes to developing globally, this was just a really small sliver, microfinance, the one that I know personally. And if any of you know any more, feel free to share. But we'll go through some other few paths to figure out other ways that you can learn more about impact investing. So let's start it off. Who wants to pick? Oh, okay. All right. So before I click Toronto first, everybody, the synopsis around this one is, so we went globally, but now we know that there's local businesses out here that have their own impact, whether it's local businesses that have a global impact or it's local businesses that have a local impact. So I think one that everyone knows well that we can use as a case study is Tentry. So does everyone know what Tentry is? Okay. So for those of you that don't, this is probably one of the biggest bro videos I've ever seen, and you'll figure out why.
I'm in Hawaii, and I was going to school out there, and one night I was sitting in my dorm, and I'm on Facebook talking to Kalen Emsley, a friend who used to play football against each other.
I was looking through Facebook, and I saw a bunch of cool photos coming up from my friend Dave.
And he said, whoa man, like your pictures are super cool. It looks like you're having a blast. And I was like, well, why don't you come out here and experience it?
And the next morning, actually, I went out and I flew to Hawaii.
We were hiking, biking, surfing,
Skydiving, scuba diving.
Every day we were doing a different outdoor activity and interacting with the environment, and we just fell in love with it. We were hiking up this mountain one day, and the girls kept talking about their Tom shoes and their Lulu. Lulu this, Lulu that.
Like, it was a beautiful hike, but that was getting on our nerves.
When we get to the top of this mountain, we're looking around the island and we're thinking, wow, like this place is gorgeous.
We thought, why not create something where consumers can give back to the environment so we can try and sustain it.
So we came up with the idea of 10 trees. For every item we sell, we plant 10 trees.
The next morning we went for breakfast with these girls, and it turned out that they were graphic designers. So we asked her to do up a design, and she drew it on the beach on her handheld, and that's where this story took off.
So after Hawaii, I came back to my home province of Saskatchewan, and Kaylin and I started working. Like, the support locally was phenomenal, and it's really allowed us to push forward and grow this brand across Canada.
All right. So these bros were in Hawaii, and they realized that they want to make a business, which, as funny as that video is, like they've actually created a phenomenal impact financially and socially. So if you take a look at what these guys did as soon as they came back from their brocation in Hawaii, was they made $120,000 in sales just in 3 months. And a lot of you might know this from the Dragon's Den episode that they were on. And today, a lot of people thought it was a fad. They were like, hey, these guys are just like selling to their bros, and it's just going to be something that's short-lived. And after 5 years, they're generating $5.5 million in sales, which is incredible. The social impact side of it is that there's 21 million trees that have been planted to date, and they're targeting 1 billion by 2030. So what is Tentree really selling? Like, you're getting this awesome shirt, you're getting this sweater, these pants, but you can see on the right on their Instagram page, they're really promoting a lifestyle. There's only really 4 photos there that really show any type of clothing. So for those of you who are thinking of starting businesses or entrepreneurs, it's really selling this image and actually having this impact that a lot of customers are really behind. So these are a few other companies that actually have an impact focus as well. So this is just a quick snapshot. And I know a lot of you are shocked because you probably see Shell there and you're like, oh my God, this like oil and gas company that's ruining the world. And when you look at them in that space, they're actually a lot better than their peers. Shell actually is focused on renewable energy. And I know this as a joke because people say they only invest in renewable energy so that they can have this photo on their financial statement of this windmill. And they're like, oh, I'm so efficient. But in reality, they're actually doing a huge impact. And they've invested over $1 billion in just renewable energy today. So that's just a small, quick snapshot of local businesses having social and environmental impacts. And a quick just switch of the topic is, for all you entrepreneurs out there, those of you who are looking for grants, one thing that governments actually realized is that they can't do this themselves. Governments have all their citizens pushing these impact focus. They're like, hey, we want education to go up. We want poverty to go down. And what governments realized is that they don't have these resources themselves to do this, and also realized if they were to do it themselves, it would take a lot longer. So this convoluted diagram, what it shows is that governments are looking for private investors and entrepreneurs to really drive these changes. So governments here, and this is a project I worked on myself, governments in Toronto want to create innovation in Toronto. They want to have us be the hub of artificial intelligence. So what they're doing is they're going to investors and they're going to entrepreneurs and saying, hey, if you can get this impact threshold, which is increasing employment in innovation by 10%, we will guarantee you a return of 10%, which is awesome. So entrepreneurs are starting businesses being like, hey, I'm getting this guarantee from the government, let me do this social impact. And that's something that's new, that's been done in Europe for a really long time, and they're bringing over to North America. Okay, I think we have time for potentially 2 more. Hashtag blessed. All right. So, synopsis for hashtag blessed. So you think it's financial institutions, you think it's retail investors, but did you know that religions are getting into impact investing? I know. The Pope is actually an avid impact investor. So we're not here to talk about religions, but we're talking about how impact investing is now transcending traditional basic religion even. So you can see that the Pope has a ton of stories that you can Google and find out. And he's actually realizing that no longer can they rely on donations to be able to generate these massive buildings and churches, but they actually have to invest this money and socially and environmentally be able to show their followers that they're putting it to good use, but get the returns that they need to keep it going. So the stuff at the top shows about how the Pope has been an avid advocate for impact investing, but also the Islamic religion has started a finance platform dedicated to investing behind their religion in impactful ways. Cool. Awesome. Well, let's go to, some of these ones are short. Let's go to one more, and then we can switch it over to Q&A. Yeah. Ooh, hashtag nerd out. Okay. So hashtag nerd out is a lot. I will tell you that. There's a lot that you can handle. I have to give you the warning. because the first time I showed a friend of mine hashtag nerd out, which is actually Muriel, who leads the space here, she literally walked out this door because she was like, oh my God, this is too much. So I will tell you it's a lot to handle in the sense that it's a bunch of formulas, right? So these are formulas, as weird as it sounds, that some of us actually know. So the first formula is very simple. It's you have money, you put it into your savings account, you get an interest back. You put $100, it starts compounding. This is like maybe university or high school math. And then you have a little bit complicated for some finance professionals. You're trying to calculate the capital, the weighted average cost of capital. What is the cost of capital for a business? And it gets a little complicated. But when you talk about social impact, it can get even more complicated. So this formula right here, I'm not going to lie to you. I have no idea what it says. There's a lot of symbols in there. But it shows that for people who really want to get really theoretical with this, there is that path. You're able to really quantify impact here. Just like looking at it here, people are trying to use variables to actually figure out what is the quantitative impact that I'm creating and how can I make this a formula that keeps on going. And that's fine. For me personally, this is not my jam. And I'm happy none of you are asking me to explain this. But for some people, and it ties into one of the other journeys, there's actually programs dedicated for people to learn this. And there is some validity to it. Without the formulas in the back here, a lot of us can't do our day-to-day jobs. Especially I can't if I didn't know what the weighted average cost of capital of a business was. So there are people out here benefiting from all these formulas. And if you're one of those people that love to nerd out and want to learn more, don't ask me. You'd have to Google it yourself. Cool. So maybe there's time for one last one, and then we'll jump into some Q&A and go into a discussion. All right. Cool. So this is actually a great question that Grant just asked right now. I love this. I want to impact invest, but how can I actually do it and quickly? I don't want to change my job. I don't want to kind of start my own business. And there's actually, a lot of you might know this, but there are quite a few investment platforms that realize how beneficial this is to offer on their system. So Wealthsimple just started an ESG platform, which starts with environmental, social governance. And they take your money, invest it in companies they identify as ESG friendly. And when they put that product on their platform, their website actually crashed. So they had so much demand for that product that no one else could invest in that day in any other product because their system actually crashed. So you can tell that these are quite popular products, and that a lot of other firms here are actually following that trend. So a quick snapshot shows Wealthsimple has on their website. And to my earlier point, you're actually generating still strong returns. Over the last 3 years, they generated 28.2% in returns. So given limited time, I think we can just go into a little bit of a wrap-up. So there's a lot of words here. Probably not paying attention to me right now, and you're all reading it. But these are some themes that people are passionate about. So the one takeaway I want all of you to learn is if you feel that illiteracy is something that you're passionate about, there are actually ways for you to put your money to use to help that, to solve that. And it just takes a simple Google search to figure out if there's companies beyond that and if you can invest behind them. So if we quickly look at how to learn more, and this bald gentleman right here wants to learn a lot more about impact investing. For me, as many of you probably know, I was a huge nerd growing up, and I love books. So books are usually my first approach to try to learn more about something. Nice hardcover and hard copy books. So I've read these books, and I'm happy to chat more about them, and there's a ton out there. But there's actually a lot of reputable large banks and corporations that are looking to do more impact investing and have written a lot of research reports around that. And I'm also a very big visual learner, so I love watching TED Talks, and there are a ton of smarter people, better looking people talking about impact investing. So, and then the last part is the open impact, and this is something that I recently came across, which is actually really cool if you guys want to play around with it. It's a Canadian database that allows you to search up the themes that you're really passionate about, and it actually shows the investment firms that invest behind it. And either if you want to change your career and look at a firm, or you just want to put your money somewhere, this is a really good resource in order to figure out how to invest behind the themes you're passionate about. Okay, so as we wrap up, there is a final thought. So I came across a quote that I thought would be perfect for this, and it's a quote I heard a couple years ago, and it's by Peter Tufano, who is the Dean of Side Business School at Oxford University and is also a professor at Harvard Business School, and it goes like this. Rather than help 1,000 people make $1 million, let's help millions of people make $1,000. All right? So all of you ones that wanted to nerd out, $1 million to 1,000 people is $1 billion. But $1,000 for 1 million people is also $1 billion, but much more of an impact. So with that, I'd like to say the next time that you all try to look to investing your money, think about it one step further. Instead of just putting it into, say, Questrade, take that initial look and figure out if you want to invest behind the themes you're getting for, because hopefully my presentation is showing you that you can actually get a strong financial return as well. And with that, I'd like to say thank you.